Today I want to give you 3 tips for handling maintenance requests like a professional property manager. You know, the number one reason that tenants give for leaving a rental property is because they're dissatisfied with how their maintenance requests are being handled. From a tenant's perspective, they're paying great money to live in your rental property, and they expect everything in that home to work right all the time. When something breaks, they just want it fixed, and they want it fixed fast and with little hassle. Well, unfortunately, there are some landlords out there who are hurting themselves because they're not handling maintenance requests like a professional property manager would. So let me share with you these 3 tips. Number 1, be responsive. Number 2, use professional repairmen. And number 3, follow up with the tenant to make sure that the problem is solved. So let's talk about the first one, be responsive. You know, every tenant expects to hear back from their landlord when they report a maintenance request. Now, depending on the severity of the problem, determines how quickly you need to respond to that tenant. For example, if a tenant comes home from work and they find that there's water running down the walls in the house, it's reasonable that they would expect a response from you in 5 or 10 minutes after they make a phone call, because they need to know what to do next, and obviously you want to make sure that you get somebody out to that house right away. If they're calling you about a ceiling fan that's not working right in a bedroom, that might take a few days or even a week or so to get out to fix that problem, but at least having a response from you within 24 hours or so of them calling is a reasonable expectation for the tenant. Again, all the tenant wants to know is that you've gotten their request and that you're doing something, that you're working on it. They're willing to wait a few days for minor things, but they certainly are in a heightened state of anxiety when it's a major thing like water running down a wall or some other major thing like that. They want you to respond right away. So be responsive. Number 2, use a professional repairman. You know, if you lived in your rental property prior to it becoming a tenant-occupied property, you might have made the decision while you were living there to make some repairs yourself. Maybe you didn't have any problem crawling under the kitchen sink and fixing that leaky drain. Or maybe you were in the bathroom and you did some rewiring for an electrical outlet. Or maybe you performed various other repairs on that property while you were living there. And that's perfectly fine. But once you have a tenant living in that property, that changes the rules. Because now that a tenant is living there, this becomes a commercial endeavor, not just a home that you as a homeowner are living in. And so when it's a commercial endeavor, you need to make sure that you're using properly licensed, qualified, and insured vendors to make the repairs on that rental property. If you aren't using properly qualified vendors, then you're putting yourself at risk if that vendor performs work and doesn't do a good job, which ultimately could cause damage to your rental property and also cause damage to the tenant's belongings. And so without using proper vendors, you would be liable for tenant's property that is damaged, and you might find yourself liable for injuries that someone has if they're out there working at your house and they don't have the proper insurance to pay for those. So use professional repairmen. The third thing, follow up with tenants after you've been notified that the repair has been fixed to make sure that they're satisfied with the job that was done. And this is just a nice touch at the end, letting the tenant know, hey, I'm just calling you to make sure you're satisfied with the repair. Then they know that you really care about them, you care about how they're living in your property, and you care to make sure that everything is working right while they're living there. So be responsive, use a professional repairman, and follow up with the tenant afterwards to make sure that the problem is solved. If you do those 3 things, you'll be treating your tenants like a professional property manager would.